Welcome back. We are back on Buckeye Talk. It's Doug Lesmerises, it's Nathan Baird, it's Stephen Means, refreshed, reinvigorated by our first week off on the history of podcasts, basically. So hopefully, we hope you missed us. We missed you. We hope you missed us. We hope you're not tuning back and be like, oh yeah, those guys, huh? I didn't even notice they were gone. But even if you think that, if you're here, we appreciate you being here. We are, Nathan, that was like the end, right? I thought like we sort of ended the last season. The last podcast we did a week ago was our Market Down Monday predictions. How did they hit in 2022? And now we are looking ahead to 2023. So welcome, everyone, to the 2023 football season. I don't know if we intended the week off. I basically just had to go on a trip. But I think it served as we're done with last season and we're on to next season because we're starting with our first two podcasts now that we're back with depth charts for 2023.
Yeah, it's a clean break. I feel like we're kind of like a TV show. Like even these shows that go year round, like last week tonight with John Oliver, like they were just on break. They like take a break for the winter and take off for like a couple months, and then they come back and they're ready to go with the new year. So that's what we're here to do as well.
Yeah. So actually, I was in New York City over the weekend. My wife and I went to a taping of the Stephen Colbert show. So you get a little bit behind the scenes. I asked Stephen Colbert if he needed any tips on how to, host a podcast or anything. He didn't want those tips. But I think we needed a break. It was funny. We saw people who know Columbus TV. Jared Smalley, the great sports and news anchor from Channel 4 in Columbus, was on the parking shuttle that my wife and I were on Sunday night when we got back from the airport because he had taken a break because it's like, oh, football's kind of over. And then everybody who covers sports in Columbus is allowed to take a tiny, like just a little, so he and his wife had gone on a little trip. So anyway.
I thought you were going to say you saw him at the Colbert show.
That
would have been the greatest coincidence of all time.
Yeah.
Parking shuttle.
Oh, I forgot to ask. I just realized. Oh, I can't believe I forgot to do this. I was all excited to do this. I wanted to get this guy listened. I was in New York City. It was a 50th birthday celebration for my college roommate. So a lot of people got together and we went out to dinner at a restaurant. And I had noticed before we went, I forgot to do it. I was so excited. The executive chef of the restaurant is an Ohio State grad and like has Ohio State all over his bio. And I wanted to be like, hey, executive chef, like, do you listen to Buckeye Talk? Can we get a free app? But I forgot to do it. How did I forget to ask for a free app? Oh, if you're an executive chef of a very nice Italian restaurant in New York City and you're listening to this podcast, I was in your restaurant over the weekend and I forgot to say hello. This is what we're doing. I actually researched this so we could do this. We're resetting Nathan's projected depth charts for 2023. But Stephen, this is not just any depth chart. This is the depth chart of the team that in July of 2021, we proclaimed here on this podcast as potentially the greatest team in college football history. So I did go back and we'll do this Tuesday pod is the offense. Wednesday pod will be the defense. Stephen, I went back and I listened to that podcast to see, because we made Nathan do it then too. It was like, hey, can you do a depth chart 2.5 years out? And he's like, what? So we made him do it, but he did it. And I was listening through there to Stephen of what at that moment made us think this could be the greatest team in college football history in 2023, and how different is the depth chart we're going to do today, because people know we did that. We have actually revisited that prediction one other time since July 2021, but we have to be on point with this, Stephen. And one of the questions I want us to answer in the next 2 days is, do we still think it could be one of the greatest teams in college football history? It was like, no, missed it. Total whiff by us there. Because we were out on a limb there, Stephen.
So much was built around the idea that Quinn Ewers was a perfectly rated recruit, which is hilarious because it seems like the once in a generation perfectly rated recruit is in every single cycle now. So what does that even mean anymore? Yeah. But like, everybody can't be perfect, guys. But that's so much of it has to do with that. Meanwhile, he's down there at Texas, and we're not even sure if that kid's ever going to play in a playoff game or not, because we're not sure what's going on at Texas. But I do think some of the other elements, especially offensively, are still intact here. Depending on, we'll review quarterback when we get there, but especially at the skill position spots, I would assume that some of those are the same names and some of the same reasons we had almost 24 months ago now still exist today. They're very experienced and they're super talented. Now it's about the other spots that we had questions about then, we still have questions about now.
Yeah, there are a couple names offensively that their presence on our projection in July of 2021 led us to a certain place that maybe not being on this projection now that we're actually here will affect our view of things. But let's start with quarterback, first of all, Nathan. When we did this, and I'm not going to keep saying it every time, but again, this was the episode, I think, is July 7th, 2021. And the idea was, how good could this Ohio State team be in 2023? You said Quinn Ewers at quarterback, and you said at that time, we all talked about it and agreed, that the backup quarterback was TBD, under the idea of, well, if it's like sit behind C.J. Stroud, then the number one recruit in the country is up next. Kyle-McCord and Jack Miller are not going to sit around and wait for that. Jack Miller did not sit around and wait after C.J. Stroud won that job. Kyle-McCord is still here because Quinn Ewers is not here. But you said at that time, Nathan, we were talking about three guys, and you were like, I think two of the three are going to be gone. Two of the three are gone. Ewers and Miller are gone. It's McCord here. So at that time, you said Quinn Ewers as the starter, TBD as the backup. And one of the things I want to talk about now, people obviously know what this battle is going to be. Nathan, how much differently would we view the 2023 Ohio State Buckeyes if Quinn Ewers either sitting for a year or 2 years behind C.J. Stroud? Because now we're doing alternate histories. Either he stays in high school his senior year, and then he's just C.J.'s backup last year, and that's it. Or he does come to Ohio State early, backs him up in 21 and 22. And Quinn Ewers was sitting here ready to take over. But we had not seen much because we didn't see the backup quarterbacks much this year. I don't think that would have changed. Would we have a much different view if Quinn Ewers was sitting here compared to a Devin-Brown, Kyle-McCord battle? Because those are two super highly rated guys as well.
By view, you just mean the assumption we're taking? Yes, we wouldn't have a different view. Like you're saying, we would have basically the same view of what those guys are doing at this stage of their careers. But as far as how we'd be looking at this, yeah, I think we probably would. I think maybe everybody who covers this beat would probably be talking about it in a slightly different way. And I don't know, right now we look at this as being a legitimate quarterback competition that is unfolding, right? Kyle McCord, Devin Brown are going to compete to be the starting quarterback. I don't know if we might be talking about it, taking a more sideways glance at that. I think that TBD turned out to be TDB, right? That Devin Brown, that's who showed up to play here. So I think he would probably still be here, maybe. And it works. He would still be here, or someone like him would still be here.
Oh, yeah.
But would we be talking about it more like the Justin Fields competition, or even the CJ Stroud competition? By the time that actually got to 2021, we were definitely talking about it as he's got a big lead someone has to catch up to. Maybe we even think about Kyle-McCord slightly in the same way, but not quite. So I think our view would be very different, that it would be kind of like this guy has already been anointed as the special guy and is the one who helps elevate this when he hits this fall.
Our view would be different because we've already seen Kyle McCord start a football game and and we didn't really like what we saw, while Quinn Ewers would still have the recruiting shine on him in a way that that's part of this is when you don't see a guy and you're just going off his recruiting ranking, the longer we don't see, you still have that shine for at least the first 2 years of your time in college football until we see you actually not live up to it or live up to it. Once we see it a little bit, you start to chip at that shine. That's part of the thing with Kyle McCord right now is that Akron game throws off so much because he doesn't have 100% shine as a former 5-star recruit, the same way that Quinn Ewers would have had he just shown up normally, been a true freshman this past year, and just would have been waiting on CJ to leave.
Is it Keenholz or Kindholz? I can't remember because I was off for a week. What did we say? Keenholz. We had a reference when you and Nathan were talking about on the pod of you think that the backup is TBD. You were like, I don't know, it'll be some guy from Idaho. And it was like, close. Some guy from South Dakota. Yeah. So I was like double checking Lincoln Keenholz. I was like, is he from Idaho? Oh my God. Nathan predicted the future. It's like, oh, close. I think though, if Quinn Ewers had stayed, would Devin Brown not be here? right? So this would be a Quinn
Correct.
Ewers,
Yeah.
Kyle-McCord battle right now.
Yeah. It'd
And
be,
then the question would be, would Kyle-McCord have stuck around for a battle this spring with Quinn Ewers? Or would Kyle-McCord have been like, man, now there's like CJ Stroud won that job. Now the number one recruit in the country is either in my class or the class behind me. I don't know if I'm going to stick for that. He might have stuck around for it, though, knowing that Kyle-McCord and Quinn Ewers could be the guys battling right now, and then the loser for sure would transfer, just like Dwayne Haskins, Joe Burrow in 2018. So I don't know, Nathan, but I also think, and this is just, maybe it's just me being a dope, Buckeye Talk. If Quinn Ewers was here and was the number one perfectly rated recruit in the class, I think I'd be like, well, Quinn Ewers is going to be the quarterback. But Kyle-McCord is here, and Kyle-McCord's a 5-star, was he number 19 or whatever?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, then in my head, it means that I think there's at least some chance that Devin Brown beats him out. But if Kyle-McCord was the 5-star number one guy, I just think I'd assume he was the guy. Is that me being a dope, or do you think there's something to that?
No, I think we all would assume that.
Okay,
And
I feel better. No, thank you for saying that. Good. Oh, okay.
By all, I mean like basically everybody who covers this team, I think would sort of assume that. But I also, there's a lot of dynamics there too. Like, I think you're right that Kyle-McCord would have certainly competed for the job through 2022, but if Quinn Ewers is the one coming into games early or whatever, like there's subtle hints that you get along the way, right? So whether he would have still stuck around for this spring, I don't know. That was obviously a lot of stuff that we were talking about back then, and how Kyle-McCord was really in a tough position there for a while if Quinn Ewers had stuck around, because the reward if you win the job is so huge. You're the starting quarterback at Ohio State, but the risk is maybe you're third on the depth chart, and it was a tough situation for him for a little while, but now it's worked out where he's the one that's in the driver's seat now going into this spring.
Yeah, I think as long as it's still, even if you switch Quinn Ewers for Devin Brown out, if Kyle-McCord's last 2 years still look the way they do, where he's clearly the backup quarterback, and he stays, because nothing's changed then. It's just he's been the backup quarterback, and now he has a lead for the job. It's just the natural talent from a recruiting standpoint might be a little bit higher because it's Quinn Ewers instead of Devin Brown, but the lead that Kyle-McCord would have built for himself still exists.
It's, again, these alternate scenarios, you can grind yourself into the ground, and we're not going to do it to this extent with every position, but now having watched Quinn, because like you wouldn't have this Quinn Ewers.
Yep.
You wouldn't have the Quinn Ewers who has a year of experience. That couldn't exist if he stayed at Ohio State, unless CJ Stroud was abducted by aliens, but we went through the year and he wasn't abducted by aliens. The Quinn Ewers that exist that we have seen, I don't know. I thought when he left, I was like, oh, I don't like this. You just lost the number one recruit in the country. Like, I get it. They have good quarterbacks in this room, but like, this is not great. You know, I think the same thing with Dylan Raiola. Like on a large level, you trust Ryan Day and the quarterback recruiting and development out of Ohio State. That the Ohio State quarterback, whoever it is, out of whatever competition, they'll always have good recruits, will be good. I think there's a reason. There's absolutely reasons to trust that. But still, Nathan, and we've done it here a million times, when Quinn Ewers leaves, when Dylan Raiola decommits, I think, well, that's not great, because those guys are the best of the best. But as we sit here right now, having watched Quinn Ewers in his year as a starter at Texas, you know, some inconsistencies, some footwork issues, some high moments, not great all the time, still viewed as a very good NFL prospect. I don't know that I sit here with the year that Quinn Ewers just had thinking like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe Ohio State lost that guy. And that's not a shot at Quinn Ewers, but if Quinn Ewers was Caleb Williams, if Quinn Ewers, they were both second-year players. If Quinn Ewers had had the year Caleb Williams had, and you were like, okay, well, that's the guy, he was at Ohio State. And now you'd be like, I can't, right? But he didn't have that, Nathan. So I think it feels like Kyle-McCord, Devin Brown, they'll get a good quarterback, they'll be fine. And the departure of Quinn Ewers did not torpedo the Ohio State football program.
Quinn Ewers is technically a second-year player, but as we talked about ad nauseum at the time, his situation was very different, enrolling earlier, reclassifying. And that's why at the time, and I still feel this way, the Quinn Ewers situation almost just gets put in a glass jar on its own and set on the shelf. Like that is, I think, very separate than like every other quarterback situation that's coming through Ohio State right now, even Dylan Raiola, because that was still a much more conventional recruitment and commitment. And so far as we know, Dylan Raiola is not trying to show up anywhere a year early. We'll see. But very different situation with Quinn Ewers. And it always just seemed weird at the time. And I think even when he left, it didn't seem good. But I felt like we talked about that differently than we talk about Raiola, because he came here, was around. Ohio State was already going to be set for this past year with Stroud anyway, so losing him didn't sink them for 2022, and it just felt different. The whole thing just felt different.
To contrary some of the stuff Doug was talking about, because yes, it was a big deal that they lost him because of what he was as a recruit. Can what he is now unintentionally be a recruiting selling point for Ohio State? Because, I mean, he had 15 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Now, he missed some games, but even in the games he played, nothing suggested that this dude was on the trajectory to have a 40-touchdown, 4,000-yard passing season. And that's just what we expect from Ohio State's starting quarterback. So in this world now where there's Texas, there's Alabama, there's USC, we'll see what Florida starts to do down there. Georgia clearly starting to get into the quarterback game here, where all these choices of where these top-tier quarterbacks can go. When you're trying to differentiate yourself, C.J. Stroud had 40 touchdown passes this year. Justin Fields, the year that – and you can't say it's, because Bijan Robinson was the workhorse and the lead guy of that offense, because J.K. Dobbins, the year he was here and ran for 2,000 yards, Justin Fields had 41 touchdown passes and 10 rushing touchdowns. So you can do both. And so maybe this is – Ohio State wouldn't do this because they don't necessarily always get into the negative recruiting world, but the proof is kind of in the numbers here of you send your top quarterback to Texas. This is what that happens with him from a numbers standpoint. You send him here, he's going to flirt with 50 touchdown passes and 4,000 yards every year. So it kind of can work to their favor, whether it's with the next Dylan Raiola. There's a kid named Julian Lewis in the 2026 class who is probably going to be the top quarterback there. He just got an offer. This is something that can work into their favor because, I mean, from what we see, the production is clear. You can't argue with production.
So I think that's a good point because Steve Sarkisian, is supposed to be one of those guys, right? Is an offensive guru, right? I mean, he's supposed to have that reputation and has had success in the past. So I think that's a very good point. I do think we'll have to see because, as we said, was this his second year in college? Was it his first? It was kind of weird. He did transfer. They threw him in right away. So there was an opportunity. So yes, the year before, Caleb Williams came in and was starting at Oklahoma after Spencer Rattler went south. Quinn Ewers was just trying to find the bathroom in the Woody, right? So their first years in college were so different that Caleb Williams had a much bigger foundation. But and then they both transferred. They both were at a different school and then transferred and then both started at the new school in their second year in college. So that's
same system though for Caleb. Same system.
That's true.
Even if it's a different school.
Right. It's just Lincoln Riley's put on a different jacket. Right. So so there are similarities, like factual similarities, but obviously, as both of you have pointed out, things that are very dissimilar. So I do think we got to see what Quinn Ewers looks like this year. And I do think I'm leaving open still, Nathan, that in the end, there could be oh, wow, that guy got away for Ohio State. Just because we can't, it's one of those things. But anybody watching Texas highlights from Columbus this past season wasn't doing that every weekend. So in the end, I don't think we have to go as deep into Brown and McCord right now, Nathan, because we already did that previous podcast about quarterbacks in the Big Ten and where would they rank. We're going to do 400 podcasts on them in the future. But your depth chart for right now, when we did it in July 2021, it was Quinn Ewers 1, TBD 2. Your depth chart right now is Kyle-McCord 1, Devin-Brown 2, knowing that there's a battle ahead.
Yeah, and really it's just based on Kyle-McCord has a head start here. Kyle-McCord's going into his third year. Kyle-McCord has started a game at the college level. I think that means something. Obviously, Devin-Brown wasn't there at the time to get picked to maybe start that game, but he was the primary backup last year. I think all those things add up right now in Kyle-McCord's favor. Devin-Brown's the one who has to, as Stephen has used this phrase before, you don't have to just catch Kyle-McCord. You've got to pass him up. And the thing that is best for Ohio State's quarterback room long-term is also for Kyle McCord to win this job, because we don't like to talk about transfers and speculating on it usually, but we always have made an exception for quarterback because that's just what this is and the way Ryan Day has done this room. And I did one of my Hey Nathan answer things the other day, and I led it with a question because we got several questions about that. And, if Kyle McCord wins this job, I think it makes sense for Devin Brown to stick around for another year, to be the backup, to be one alien abduction away from starting. And if Devin Brown wins the job, Kyle McCord's playing somewhere else this fall, I think. And everyone in the world would look at that and say, yeah, that's probably the prudent decision to make there for Kyle McCord. So the long-term health, if Kyle McCord comes out and wins the job, it kind of, emphatically says, hey, I've been working for this for 3 years. This is my gig. I'm ready to do it. That's definitely the attitude he's projecting too from the people we've talked to. I think he's, ready to go out and try to win this moment. But Devin Brown is making a real go at this. They seem to have a good relationship, and Devin Brown sees an opportunity here to, even if you don't win the job, to go out and just keep developing and prove yourself to the guys in that locker room, because it could be your job at any given moment, no matter how well Kyle McCord's playing.
I do think then, as we always talk about this, things happen from weakness, things happen from strength. If there's a version of this that is, and I'm trying to think of a more recent, but like the Trevor Lawrence situation, right? Where Kelly Bryant's the established starter at Clemson, Trevor Lawrence is a true freshman. It's like, we've got to play this guy. And by week 3 or week 4, they're playing that guy. If Devin Brown wins the job because we can't keep this guy off the field. You've never seen a quarterback practice like this before.
Yep.
Like, the future be darned. This guy looks like a Heisman candidate at week 1, right? That, and like Kyle was really good, Devin was through the roof, then all bets are off, go do your thing. And if you get 2 years of Devin Brown, superstar, that's a good result as well. But yeah, like, it's one of these things, Stephen, right? You stack them, and it's like Jenga. It's quarterback Jenga. If you take the guy off the top, the thing doesn't fall over. If you start pulling stuff out of the middle and moving things around, you risk it. So, I think Nathan's right. Obviously, there's a pecking order here. And then if the guy who's second in experience blows the roof off the Woody, so be it. But yeah, I think it doesn't make sense. Kyle McCord keeps things in order.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want every plan, every approach to something has a pro and a con to it. And the con here is, regardless of how you decide to build your quarterback room, it's set up to lose somebody. And I'm wondering how many people this approach is set up to lose every offseason. Because if it's still set up to where you're losing one guy, whether that's because your starter is a second-year guy who is now going off to the NFL like CJ was, or it's because there's a guy who's third who lost in the battle like Jack Miller was, and so he's out the door after 2 years of trying this. As long as you know you're only losing one guy, whether it's to the portal or to the NFL, you're fine with that. The problem, to your point of the Jenga thing, is when you lose one guy, but then it starts a ripple effect, and now you're losing multiple guys. And that's what happened last year. Now, last year's weird because Quinn Ewers wasn't supposed to be here anyway, but this year is going to be an interesting case study of that, because you almost don't want to lose any guys this year. And you do know if Kyle McCord loses his battle, he's leaving, while with Devin Brown, if he loses, he might just stick around. And so you have a legitimate shot of having a 4 quarterback room. But then there's going to be other years where it's a 3-way battle just because of how things worked out, and 2 of those guys leave. And then what does that mean for your room? So that there's going to be years where there's going to be abundance if things go perfectly, but then there's going to be years where things go perfectly and you still end up with a 2 quarterback room heading into the fall.
But it's the other reason why. It's the other reason why Ryan Day likes to have 4 quarterbacks, too. If you can get 4 scholarship quarterbacks, which they have now with the addition of Tristan Gebbia from Oregon State as a transfer, just happened in the past week, they're going to have 4 going into this spring. And if you were to lose 2, you're still not down to a non-scholarship quarterback behind him like they were in 2019. Or I can't remember if any of those backups in 2019 were on scholarship, but they were.
Hoke and Chugs were, but
yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's, you don't want to be in that. They're trying to avoid that situation. What's the other wrinkle, though, with McCord Brown is we keep talking about this like the decision guys would have to make, but Brian Day usually drags this out, right? Like they didn't in 2018 because Joe Burrow was far enough into his career that you kind of needed to give him that respect, right? that courtesy to let him know at that point. Is Kyle-McCord in the same situation? Like, Brown would have to kind of like blow him off the field almost by the end of the spring for you to like make that call. So I'm skeptical that would happen. I would still expect this to be something that they haven't announced, unless the other thing happens, unless McCord really just torches it. I don't think they like announce a winner of this maybe until their usual timeline, which is middle of August.
I think 2 years into a system where this is technically your second quarterback battle, I think McCord would ask for some. This would be he'd probably demand a conversation in April after that spring game. Because that's the key. Is like he came in already in a quarterback battle, knowing that he already knew this. I'm going to come in immediately be in a quarterback battle, and if I lose, I'm probably going to sit for 2 years before I get a chance at this again. So far, this is still according to one of the two plans that was going to happen for Kyle-McCord. After this spring, it's not really a part of the plan if he doesn't win the starting quarterback job. So I do think that it's not extreme to the Joe Burrow point, because Burrow was like in year like 4 or 5 at that point. But I think 2 years into a program where you've been through 3 springs and 2 quarterback battles is enough of a reason for a quarterback to be like, yo, what are we doing here?
So Burrow and Haskins that spring, Burrow was entering his 4th season of college, and Haskins was entering his 3rd season. So now we have guys, Kyle-McCord is entering his 3rd season, devin-brown is entering his 2nd season. And especially because I think in perception and reality, the older guy was behind in that circumstance. That Burrow was a year older than Haskins, but because he broke his hand, wasn't the backup who came in, didn't come into the Michigan game in 2017 the way Haskins did. Dwayne was viewed as the leader, so Burrow needed an answer at the end of spring as a guy entering year 4. Neither of these guys are old enough, but it is interesting to think about. Like, it's not unreasonable, Nathan. It's not unreasonable for a guy to want an answer, either of them, in entering year 3 or year 2.
Right, but I think the legitimate answer, if you're Kyle-McCord, and we're completely speculating about this, January 23rd, but like the legitimate answer on August or on April 16th, the day after the spring game or whatever, could be, you're absolutely in the lead right now, but we're not ready to give you the job. So, I mean, that's a legitimate answer. It's a legitimate question to ask. That could be the legitimate answer. That's why, Ryan Day, every time he's asked about this, he's like, boy, it's delicate. Like, yeah, it is.
So it becomes is that answer good enough to make him stay and continue to risk it?
I mean, that's a tough thing to walk away from. Like, you are right now the leader to be the starting quarterback legitimately at Ohio State, which may contend for a national championship this fall.
Yeah,
I mean that's a tough thing to walk away from.
But also devin-brown could like light it up all summer and then come to the fall camp and it's like, oh wait, devin-brown is awesome. We got to start this kid now. So I think Kyle-McCord is in a position where it's not. I wouldn't blame him for wanting an answer, but then once he gets that answer, if that's his answer, is yes, you're in the lead right now. Is that a good enough answer for Kyle-McCord to stick around?
There is a difference between somebody entering August as number 1 and somebody entering as number 2, or entering August as the battle rages on, who knows, it could be anybody. And I'm trying to think how Jim Harbaugh phrased things, because it's at least some similarities, right? Cade McNamara had been the starter. And I think you were getting, as Jim Harbaugh was at Big Ten Media Days last July, he was not talking about Cade 1, JJ 2. It was like the battle's on, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, he was saying, what was he saying, Nathan?
At one point he said, yeah, we have a starting quarterback. It's Cade McNamara. I'm almost sure that's what he said. Didn't he say that at one point?
Because I guess people were pushing him on that. Because I think the idea was, the perception was, it's back and forth, it's even, it's tied. Because JJ actually, I think, had missed some spring because he had some health issues, maybe even some early August. And then I think you're right, Nathan, because it seemed like it was an open battle. And then people pushed Harbaugh enough to get him to say that, and he did say that. So that's different because one guy was a returning starter. But in that situation, the guy who was number 2 wound up winning the job. And then the number 1 guy left. So this is just normal, though. I don't want to overcomplicate this. This is what you have when you have more than one quarterback option and the starter left. So but it's going to be fun. I like spring quarterback battles. Like if you lined up, like name 10 things you like about covering football, but college football. I think spring football quarterback battles would be in my top 3.